for joining us. We expect another wonderful presentation.
Hello and welcome to today's webcast on the effectiveness of customized employment for transition-age youth with disabilities. My name's Jennifer McDonough and I'm the project director for our Customized Employment Research Project. Let's start by looking at our training plan for today. First, I'm going to give a very short overview of customized employment. If you'd like more in-depth training on customized employment, I highly encourage you to look at our website, www.vcurtc.org. On that website, we have tons of webcasts and even a web course that's totally dedicated to customized employment. After that, we're going to have a panel discussion of employment specialists share their experiences on customized employment. You'll hear about examples of all phases of the CE process. And finally, we're going to close with some case studies that take you through each step of the customized employment process. Let's start off with what customized employment is, as defined by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act. It is defined as competitive, integrated employment for an individual with a significant disability that's based on an individualized determination of the strengths, needs, and interests of the individual with a significant disability and the business needs of the employer, and carried out through flexible strategies. Let's deconstruct this definition a little bit. First, competitive and integrated employment. So we're talking about individuals making at least minimum wages or wages comparable to other coworkers doing similar tasks, and in a work environment with employees without disabilities. So this is not sheltered employment, this is not enclave work. Second, individuals with significant disability. So individuals who need significant support in order to find and maintain employment. Next, based on an individualized determination of the strengths, needs, and interests of the individual. So this is a very personalized approach and very person-centered, focusing on what people can do, not what they can't. The next part of the definition is the business needs of the employer. So customized employment really looks at the needs of the business so that it's a win-win for both the individual job seeker and the business owner or manager. This is not a charity approach to businesses. The individual with the disability is providing an actual needed service, good, or activity. And the last part of the definition talks about carried out through flexible strategies. So the individual's not applying for open positions that are already existing in the market, and we're not using traditional job search strategies. We're really looking at networks, building relationships with businesses, and utilizing strategies such as informational interviewing, work experiences, working interviews, and employment proposals, and job negotiation. Next, let's take a few moments to walk through the steps of the customized employment process, and we're going to look at each of these more in depth. So the individual starts out in discovery, then moves into a vocational profile or a discovery profile. Then we look at customized employment planning and meetings around that, followed up by the development of a portfolio or a visual resume. Then the customized job development and negotiation, and then of course accommodation and post-employment support. As you can see, these are not traditional terms that we use in the employment process. So let's look at each step. So traditionally we would learn about an individual with a disability through a series of vocational assessments where a state vocational rehabilitation counselor might go through some assessments or send them to someone within the agency to have assessments done. This process is totally different. This is all done in the community, in locations where the customer feels most comfortable. We use what's called discovery, and that is looking at the job seeker through personalized approaches in environments that are comfortable to that job seeker so that we can identify their skills, interests, and abilities, as well as their employment conditions that they need for a job. One of the ways we do this is through home visits. In these home visits, we actually go out to their home, have conversations with the job seeker, with their family, anybody that is in the home regularly with that job seeker. We take a look at the environment. We observe what's going on in that environment. Is it a young adult who has certain chores that they do on a regular basis? Oftentimes we might see sports memorabilia scattered around the home. Is that something that the individual that we're working with has, or is that part of the family's collection? We asked that similar question to a young adult that we were working with recently. They had Virginia Tech pictures, photos, footballs scattered around, and it was his sister's memorabilia, but he had taken on the love of Virginia Tech as well. She was a student there, and every Saturday during the fall they would go to Virginia Tech for those football games. So as part of the negotiation with his employer, it was important that we make sure that he had access to Saturdays off so that he could attend those football games with his sister. It's also a great way to observe how an individual accesses things and what types of supports they need in the home. I recently worked with a young man who had a high spinal cord injury, and so he had limited use of his arms and hands. But watching him in his home, I was able to see how he accessed his remote control and his cell phone using an eraser on a pencil. The next thing that we do is interview family, friends, and other support folks who are involved in the individual's life. This gives us a different perspective on the young person or the adult that we're working with. Oftentimes, I might see myself one way, but my family, my friends may see me in a different light and may see strengths that I have that I didn't realize that I have. So it's important to gather that information from friends and family. It's also important to observe the individual in different environments. I know that the way my children act at home is totally different from the way that they act in the community. When they're at work, they're very professional. When they are at school, they rarely talk. If you were to ask me how my kids were, I would say that they talk nonstop. But that's the difference between how I see my children and how others see my children. It's also important that we understand the individual's cultural and social background. This can affect how the individual or the family sees work in their culture, in their home. It's also important that we understand their role in the family and in the community, and how they view certain things that are important in that community. For example, church is really important here in the South to many of the individuals that we work with. We have some individuals who absolutely will not work on Sundays, and so that's really important that we know that ahead of time so that we can negotiate that with the employer as we look at employment. It's also important to observe the job seeker in multiple environments to collect information. We can observe them in their home, their school, in social settings, as well as places that are novel to the individual. And what can we learn from that? Well, we can learn a lot. Just by taking someone to the mall, we can learn what they like, how they handle money. Are they able to make a transaction on their own? Do they use a debit card? Do they use cash? Do they use cash and wait for the correct change? Are they able to slide their debit card through the machine and enter their PIN? What stores do they go to? This gives us insight into their interests. Do they make rash decisions with what they're going to buy, or do they really look at prices? What else do they do while they're at the mall? Do they go to a restaurant? How do they order? Are they using the pictures? Are they able to read? All of these are important things that we can observe just by an hour trip to the mall with an individual. We also want to understand non-work needs of the job seeker. And this includes everything else that's important to the job seeker that affects work. Transportation is a huge issue. How is the individual going to get to and from work? Because how they get there will affect when they're available to work. If they're using specialized transportation, we have to consider when is that available to them. Are there certain hours that it's not available? So overnights are not an option, or evenings or weekends are not an option. How about budgeting? Do they need help with money management? Do they need help from a benefits counselor if they're receiving disability benefits or other federal or state benefits? What about recreation and social activities? This is a huge area of life that we don't want to forget about, and we don't want to leave out in the planning process. Are there individuals who attend church every Sunday or every Wednesday, and that's important to them, and we want to make sure that they can still do that? Are there medical appointments or regular counselor visits that we need to attend to so that the employer knows that ahead of time and we've negotiated that in the employment process? We also utilize informational interviews, and this is a great way for both the job seeker and the employment specialist to learn about businesses and the tasks being performed in those businesses. So many individuals with disabilities that we work with have no idea about the vast number of businesses in their community and what is done in those walls. And so informational interviews are a great way to see what's going on in a business, and also to learn more about those businesses and what the work culture is like within the business. Job shadows and business tours also helps job seekers and employment specialists get a visualization of tasks that are being performed in that environment, and again, what the culture is like within a business. My best friend came down this weekend and she got a new job. She was excited to tell me that when she had gone on her interview and to learn more about the company, that they had a whole wall of coffee machines and bowls full of M&Ms. This was a huge perk to her. It was one of the reasons she chose that job, because she loves coffee, and who doesn't love chocolate? Once you've completed the discovery activities, you should be able to get a good idea of who your job seeker is, and that will allow you to build a vocational profile of the individual. It brings together everything that you've learned about the individual during the discovery process and really guides the guides the businesses that you'll look at for job development. You can think of it as a story, if you will, a story of who the job seeker is, focusing mainly on the positives, really only on the positives. It's not a judgmental, it's not a biased document, it's a straight facts. This is who the person is and this is what we observed. And it shows what the individual's skills, abilities, and interests are and what their features of employment need to be. This also includes an employment planning meeting where the individual can invite all of their friends and family that are important to them to talk about what the plan is moving forward, and allows us to take some time to brainstorm ideas of businesses and job tasks that would be a good match for the individual. What I've seen in my career is that traditional resumes don't always portray the skills and abilities of the individuals that we serve and the job seekers that we represent. So customized employment utilizes a portfolio or visual resume for individuals that really do highlight their skills, abilities, and interests. And we can use them to share with business managers and business owners when we meet with those individuals to give a better and a more accurate picture of the individual that we're working with. we like to use PowerPoints, and in those PowerPoints use videos or a combination of videos and pictures. We've used iMovie and other apps before to kind of highlight and show a short movie about the individual. And using as many photos about not only the individual and what they have experienced doing, what they did during that discovery process, but also what's their interests and some of their maybe high school activities that they've done to build a nice, well-rounded picture of the individual. So when we're looking at job development and customized employment, we're not looking at open positions, but rather strategically targeting businesses in our community that match what we determined through the discovery process for the individual that we're working with. We're utilizing both the job seekers network as well as our own network as an employment specialist, but we're also utilizing the family or any friends or support folks that are important to the individual. We're using their network. The bigger the network, the better. And we're approaching businesses with the intent to learn more about them. Often as rehab professionals, we go into businesses and we just talk and talk and talk and talk and never ask any questions of the business. So it's really important that we learn how to shut our mouths a little bit more and listen a little bit more. So ask open-ended questions of the business and let them talk. I promise they will love to talk about their business and what they do and not have us worry so much about sharing so much, especially in those first meetings. We want to give them time to learn, for us to learn about them, and then we can share about what we do. Another approach that we use is working interviews. We use these a lot at VCU, and they've been very successful. And this is an opportunity for the individual to go into the business at a preset time for a preset amount of time, so really no more than an hour or two, to show the business owner or manager how that individual is able to do the job or the task that you have negotiated for that individual to try. Oftentimes, individuals don't really interview as well as maybe their colleagues, so this would give the individual a time to show what they can do versus using verbal skills to do that. And then after that, we would be negotiating positions using an employment proposal that would lay out exactly what the task would be, what types of support the individual would need, what the role of the employment specialist would be, what hours the individual would work, a proposed pay rate for the individual. The last step of customized employment would be where the employment specialist would actually work with the new employee and the employer at the job site, providing on-site training, identifying any accommodations or supports that the individual needs, whether those are physical supports, whether they're compensatory strategies, but also looking at natural supports there in the business as well as community supports. So now that we've given you a little overview of customized employment, we want to share about some of the research that we're doing at VCU. Very little research has been done regarding customized employment in this model. And so we were fortunate enough to be awarded a disability rehabilitation and research project on customized employment of individuals with disabilities. We're testing the effectiveness of customized employment as an intervention to facilitate employment for youth with disabilities. And this project is funded through the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. And we're working with young adults with developmental disabilities who are ages 18 to 24. It is a partnership with Transcend, and we are evaluating and comparing employment outcomes of individuals with intellectual disabilities and autism who receive customized employment versus those who receive services as usual. At this point, we're going to hear from some of those employment specialists and research staff, both from VCU and Transcend, regarding the work that's been done thus far in the project.
Hi, I'm Marianne Beckman from Transcend. I'm the site coordinator for a customized employment grant with VCU.
I am Jenny Light, and I also work for Transcend, and I am an employment consultant.
I am Caitlin Jones. I work for VCU ROTC, and I'm an employment specialist.
Okay. All right, we're here today to have a panel discussion on customized employment in this project. Why don't we start out with the discovery process? Caitlin and Jenny, visiting the home of a person is recommended first step in the discovery process. What have you learned by going into a person's home that you might not have noticed if you've skipped that step? Caitlin, would you like to go first?
Yes. By going to my job seeker's home, Jane, I was able to see her interact with her family members, observe her in a comfortable setting, and this allowed me to see how she appropriately communicates with her family members, and that helps me communicate with her more effectively.
Okay.
And I would agree that being in a job seeker's comfortable environment is very important. I think they come in a much more informal way. They aren't dressed to impress, they're comfortable. One of my job seekers came out with his John Deere cap, his camouflage sweatshirt, and his Carhartt pants, so it was easy to see what his interests may be.
Okay, thank you. Caitlin, can you tell us about a discovery activity that really helped you to get to know one of your job seekers?
Yes, so a discovery activity that I got to know my job seeker, Robert, was really important because I had to build up a lot of trust and rapport with him. So we started with a discovery activity at the Science Museum. He's a physics major at VCU, and I really wanted to learn more about what type of science he was interested in. And this discovery activity allowed me to find out more about that. And then just as we got more comfortable and he trusted me more, I was able to go to his one of his science classes, and I learned that he was very outspoken and answered a lot of questions. So I was able to learn these things through discovery.
Okay. Jenny, can you think of an example?
Sure, I have a participant who loves to ride her bike. So one of the discovery activities was going for a bike ride around her neighborhood, and to just see the way that she was able to navigate herself with safety rules, other cars on the road. She had a very huge level of independence when she was on her bike. She didn't need a lot of other supports. It was her own little world. So that was good for me to see these are the things she's able to do and has a level of independence when she's involved in something she enjoys.
Okay, thank you. So as you're going through your discovery, why do you think it's important then to identify employment themes for a job seeker?
I think it's very important because it's more individual specific for the job seeker. It allows the employment specialist to have more of a direct path when looking at different businesses. And it's going off the interests and strengths and abilities of the job seeker and not just a broad bucket of information.
Right, you're kind of looking at what the job seeker wants instead of what an employer may want. So we are able to pick a general category that has the strengths and the interests of the job seeker, and we can move on from there in terms of where we will conduct our informational interviews.
Jenny, would you like to go first and give us an example of how you've identified an employer's needs for a specific job seeker?
Sure, I think that goes back to when we go into an employer doing a lot more listening than talking, asking those questions that are open-ended and looking around the environment to see what are those jobs that seem to be unattended to because there are bigger tasks to be completed in their place of work.
A specific example that I have was observing in a grocery store. I was kind of observing and I noticed that they kind of they had messy and unorganized aisles, and one of my job seekers had experience with this, which was called facing, which is organizing the different boxes and making sure they were put in place and there weren't boxes on the floor. So I scheduled an informational interview, which is important in this process, and had a conversation with the manager of the grocery store that I observed and customized this employment for the job seeker.
And me too, in a place of employment, it was a small engine shop, and many tractors were on display to be bought and sold, and all of them were covered with dust and dirt. And seeing that they wanted to present their machines in a good way, I was able to ask, who does the cleaning of these machines? How do you keep up with that? And he could then comment on, well, we used to keep that very clean, and we don't have someone to do that anymore. So it's just asking those questions and listening.
Okay. How do you describe the benefits of customized employment to an employer?
I think it's important to let that employer know that by customizing a position, they can build a job task to the strengths of the job seeker. So you can take those interests and those strengths of our job seekers, they can look at what they need to do to operate in an efficient way, and they can customize that position for that job seeker.
I agree with Jenny.
Okay. So why? Why would an employer want to customize a job for a person with a disability?
I think a person would want to customize a job with someone with a disability because it frees up maybe an employee that they are taking over some tasks that aren't a part of their job duties. Maybe not paying that coworker overtime. Or usually with a person with a disability in the community, it bumps up or improves the employee's morale.
I think it improves the culture of the whole company. When you have someone that is working there with a disability, they are seen as productive members of that business, and that they can do just as much good as all of the other employees in that business.
Okay. So can you share with us, what do you think the benefits of customized employment are for the job seeker, for that individual with disabilities?
I think there's a lot of benefits. It gives them a sense of community, a sense of purpose. It can boost their confidence by going into work. They gain friendships, relationships.
I agree. I think it's the fact that it's customized, it again is to the strengths and interests of that job seeker. So they go into a job feeling comfortable and confident in what they're doing. They know they can perform this task, which then translates into them being wanted at that place of employment. People are glad that they're there, and it creates that community and the friendships that Caitlin's talking about.
Okay. So next we'll move into, each of you will have that chance to go through a case study with really specific examples on what we just talked about. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm introducing Sarah. I'm her employment specialist. I've been working with Sarah since January 2018, and she's 21 years old. So let's start with discovery. Discovery was really important with Sarah. My first visit with her was at her home. I remember her opening the door with a bright smile. She immediately grabbed my jacket, hung it up, great personality. I remember thinking, wow, she has a great personality. I sat on the couch with her mom, and we just had a conversation. We all had a conversation. Sarah involved as well, and I got to know that she really likes spending time with her dog. She loves to dance and sing. She went to school at Norfolk Academy and had a lot of work experiences, which included being involved in a vet tech. She worked at a gym. She was currently involved in an internship at Hospitality Food Services. And the next thing we did was we wanted to get to know each other a little bit more, so we went into our discovery activity. So with our discovery activity, the very first thing we did was we went to a smoothie shop. I remember at my home visit with Sarah, her mom told me that was her absolutely favorite thing. And if we wanted to get to know each other a little bit more and have her tell me a little bit more about herself, was to go to a smoothie shop and just kind of sit with her, play games. We observed them getting some of the smoothies put together, and I really got to know Sarah a lot more. And when we were at the smoothie shop, she invited me to her internship. So her internship was at Performance Food Group, where she was working with a coworker that helped Sarah kind of stay on her tasks. And she started this internship with her classmates, but the manager said that she really stood out out of all of her classmates because of her personality and her work ethic. So exploring this theme, I went and observed her there, and I observed that Sarah was very comfortable going through the first floor. Performance Food Group was very comfortable with some of the coworkers she worked with and knew what she was doing throughout her whole shift, and I saw her already getting independent. So some of Sarah's job duties were she was stocking the cafe and the break room with tableware, plates and cups and drinks, and helping the head chef. She was delivering mail to each of the break rooms, and she was stamping the outgoing mail. She delivered FedEx that was coming into Performance Food Group to all the different employees. And she also, at the end of her shift, she would go and help the receptionist at the front desk answering phone calls and just kind of saying hi to all the employees that were coming in. So the next step for me was, after observing her for about 2 weeks, I approached management, and we started with a job negotiation. So the management was very interested in Sarah having an employment specialist with her instead of one of the employees interrupting his day and job duties, to be with Sarah and kind of make sure she's staying on task, doing the tasks appropriately and effectively. So this went into Sarah getting a permanent job at Performance Food Group. She works every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. She makes $12 an hour. And with me doing job site training with her right now, she's already becomes very independent. She learned a lot of new tasks since the beginning of me watching her in her observation. And she, as an employment specialist for her, I laid out a job duty schedule, which has all of her tasks laid out that she can refer back to and check off that she's completed it. And as she's getting more independent, I've slowly faded out from her. So first we started with fading out just while I was on the job site, and she was doing it by herself, and she would check in with me after each task. And then we've gone in, I come in later into Performance Food Group, and she would start off her shift by herself. And now we've gotten to the point where I only come in a few hours a week with Sarah, and she's been very successful, very independent. The manager is really happy with her performance, and soon it will only be me coming in sporadically, checking up on Sarah and at Performance Food Group, and she's doing a great job.
Okay, so I have had the pleasure of working with Dan in my case study. Dan loves small engines. The dirtier he can be, the better. That was my first indication that this was a great place to look for Dan. When I first met him, he came to the kitchen table in his family home dressed in his Carhartt pants with his camouflage sweatshirt and John Deere hat. we sat around the kitchen table spending some time talking about things he enjoyed. And one of the things he was most proud to talk about was his side job of tree cutting, where he showed a pile of wood from ground to roof of a garage that he had stacked himself. And he also took us to show his truck and tractor, and was very proud that he knew how to change the oil on those machines and was tinkering with their engine. The first thing we decided to do was do a job shadow. So we knew that he was interested in small engines, and we went to a couple local car dealerships. But because they are such large corporations, they ran into a lot of red tape issues. So even though the store level people were very excited to have Dan come and do a work trial, the corporate offices, things got hung up, so we weren't able to follow through with that. And having gotten to know the family through discovery and doing things with Dan, Mom made us a suggestion. She said there's this great little equipment shop down the road, and Dan takes the tractor there when it's broken, he takes the snowblower there when it's broken. I think they even know him by name. So we set up an informational interview and job shadow with the equipment store. So when we went to the equipment store, we could see that there were only a handful of employees. It was a family-owned business, so the owner, he and his wife owned the store, and they had a showroom full of red and green tractors, John Deere, of course. They were covered with inches of dust. And after asking questions about how do you keep your showroom clean for when people are coming in to purchase your tractors, the owner said, well, my elderly father-in-law used to come in and clean them, but he can't get in here anymore. And we were able to say, well, Dan is your guy. If he can come to work and leave with dirt on his knees and grease under his fingernails, he's going to do a great job. So they were excited about the option of a work trial. And Dan and I went in, and within an hour's time, he had cleaned 10 tractors, spotless, shining in red, and they wanted to hire him on the spot. So from there, we did a job proposal and began our negotiations. And Dan now works there 3 days a week for a total of 11 hours. He's getting paid $8 an hour, and he truly is independent when he works there. On his latest evaluation, which was a 3-month evaluation, he had glowing reviews from his coworkers and the owner saying, quote, "We absolutely love having Dan work here." So it is a truly customized position where he's supported by his colleagues and coworkers, and we provide spot checks to be sure that things are going accordingly.
Thanks everyone for joining us today, and I want to especially thank Marianne and Jenny and Caitlin for sharing their experiences and sharing their stories about Dan and Sarah. It was great to hear that. On our website, you can find more information about our project, as well as other trainings, fact sheets, and things like that. So I encourage you to visit our website. And finally, our web board is available. So if you have any questions for any of us that you'd like more information about a specific topic, or have individuals that you're working with that maybe you've reached a barrier that you don't know how to tackle, please feel free to reach out to us and ask us any of those questions. We'd be happy to help. So have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jennifer. I will now turn it over to Heidi Decker-Maurer, who will facilitate the question and answer period. I will let Heidi know, if you didn't see, Jennifer, unfortunately, I believe is wherever she's broadcasting from, lost her internet. So she is on the phone. So Heidi, you'll need to repeat questions for Jennifer. She isn't able to see them at the moment. So I will turn it over to you. Thanks very much. Oh, sorry, Heidi. We're not hearing you, or I'm not hearing you. Perhaps volume, or nope, still not. Oh, not hearing you. Tell you what, where's the, we aren't seeing any specific questions at the moment. Oh, okay. Well, Heidi is sorting that out. Jennifer, are you on the call? Oh boy. Let's see. Are we hearing? Number of technological glitches here. We may have, let me see. Well, she said she's on. Heidi, go ahead.
All right.
Okay, I'm hearing you. Jennifer, can you, oh, you know what? I've got to, give me a minute here. I have to find Jennifer on the participant list. Oh boy.
Technology. Can't live with it. Can't.
Yeah,
live
I have to
without it.
unmute Jennifer. Oops.
Well, what we could do in the meantime,
is.
just Jennifer, thank you so much
Okay,
for.
Jennifer, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me yet?
All right.
Excellent.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much.
Hello, technology.
All right. Heidi, back to you.
Fantastic. Thanks. First of all, Jennifer, I want to thank you so much for the excellent presentation. It was just wonderful to see three folks in the field who had specific examples of things that they tried and helping their consumers get jobs that really suited them very well. It sounds like those techniques were working really well. So first of all, thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation and such a great idea, including practitioners in the presentation. So thanks for that. I'm looking over here at the questions. We have a few of them now. Thank you everybody for sending your questions in and for joining us especially. The first question that has been presented here is, how do you all deal with really difficult clients who have verbal impairments and does not communicate through sign language, but only sounds?
I'm
Jennifer?
sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure can. How do you deal with clients who have verbal impairments and do not communicate through sign language?
That's an interesting question. We were just talking about an individual that we're working with right now who does not use sign language and has very limited verbal skills. So we are looking at some different assistive technology devices, but also getting some very low-tech items put into place related to like small pocket cards and different ways to just begin that communication process. Of course, his mom will say, well, I know what he wants, you know, but we haven't spent the last 20 years with him, so, and we're not his mama. So we, you know, mamas always know, but we don't have that innate ability to understand him. So we're starting with some pretty basic low-tech, you know, just paper photos of different things that he can select by pointing to it. And then also looking at some higher tech devices as well, including, you know, apps that he can put on his phone.
That sounds like a very reasonable way to help that individual get their communicate and get their needs across. So that's a great answer. Thank you, Jen. I'm looking at our next question. The person, Lynn, thank you for the question. About how long do you spend on the discovery phase is Lynn's question.
Another great question. We were talking about that this morning. The work that we are doing with the customized employment research really is looking at how long does it take to complete discovery, because there are definitely different schools of thought out there and different providers who have their opinions and beliefs as to how long it could take, anywhere from 20, 30 hours. And nobody has researched that before. And so that is one of the things that we are researching. And we don't have any data on that just yet, but we are looking at it, and we should have more information about that soon. What we were talking about this morning in our meeting was those individuals who come to us who have very few experiences, maybe a poverty of vocational experiences or really life experiences in general, are of course going to take more time. And many of the individuals that I have met with through this project have come, they may be in school or out of school and have of course never had a job, have not had any community-based training within their school. They're kept in the school building, aren't even doing any work, say, on the grounds of the campus of the school. They're just in their classrooms and kind of going along with their daily activities, and don't have a lot of social interactions outside of school, so they have very limited knowledge of their interest areas. So we are finding that those individuals are taking longer than the individuals who have at least had some work experiences, even if those are community-based experiences through their school where they weren't paid. But that's kind of common sense, I think. So
Sure, that makes sense. And I think sometimes if folks are in school, there are a lot of students, and with their counselors, sometimes the counselors can think outside the box and come up with really good solutions, as your folks did in the video. There was a lot of creativity there, and a lot of just finding things that the people were interested in, and also finding the right kind of match. So I think those were excellent examples. And speaking of, Norma has a question. Is there an example of the job duties that were made by employment specialists that were tailored to them? So with our examples, we had the consumer who liked working with tractors, and we had the consumer who liked working in that office environment. So I'm not sure, maybe in addition to those two examples, do you have any more that you can think of off the top of your head that were made by employment specialists?
Can you hear me? I just switched over, our internet came back.
Oh, good. Fantastic.
Okay.
Sure can.
So some of the, an example that comes to mind is we had a individual come to us who was very interested in clerical duties, and she had had some experiences in school entering data, processing kind of papers, if you will, making deliveries. And so she was also interested in working in a professional setting. And so we contacted a legal office that we used our social capital for, and just made some great connections there. And she is working processing closed cases. And so she goes through and pulls out all of the material that needs to be pulled out and scanned. And then she takes the other materials and puts them into kind of a shredding file for somebody else to process, and is able to sort all of that material and put them in certain files based on the information that the attorney's office has given her. But so she closes files or closes cases for them, and she does that several days a week.
Very good. That's very interesting. We have a number of questions left. As I look at the questions, we're going to make sure and answer the questions that are going to have the most application across the most number of our attendees. So if questions are really specific, we are keeping note of them, and we will have Jennifer answer them perhaps offline if we don't have time for it by the end of our session today. The next question Lisa has posed is, When calling a company to set up an informational interview, who is the best person to ask to meet with? It is very difficult to talk with HR departments.
I would agree. It is difficult to talk with HR departments. I like to not go into a company cold. And so I would use every resource available to find a name of somebody. I like to look for a department manager or a hiring manager or someone who is actually overseeing the real work that's being done versus going in through the HR department where they're processing requests for positions and may not know what the actual day-to-day activities are. So I'm looking for a direct manager to meet with, and I'm scouring my contacts, my the individual that I'm serving, the job seekers' contacts, their families' contacts, all of the employment specialists in the office, we're using their contacts. I am not opposed to stalking folks on the internet and figuring out who works at this business, who do I know, who do they know. If it's, for example, an attorney's office and I know an attorney, I'm going to reach out to that attorney to see who they know in that particular office that they can connect me with. So trying to turn that into a warm contact is critical, in my opinion, and in my experience.
That seems to be a theme that has gone across many of our webinars, is the fact that really the professional network needs to be highly developed, and creating those relationships with employers, it sometimes will take a lot of time at the front end, but then it pays off later, and it can make things much easier later if you know someone who knows someone. So
absolutely,
that seems to follow along the lines of most of our other webinars where we've talked about working with employers. So
I'm someone who likes to talk to a lot of people, so I take every opportunity in every setting to talk about what I do and what they do, because you never know, it might work out for somebody that we are working with in the long run.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. Our next question is from Rebecca. She asks, in making the job proposal, who does that piece? Is it the job developer or the VR counselor? So basically asking a little bit, how does that process happen?
For us, it's the employment specialist or the job developer that does that. They are one and the same here at VCU. We do not separate out to one person does job developing and one person does job site training. We start with the individual at the beginning and take them all the way through to follow along. And so our employment specialist propose or create those employment proposals based on the information that they have gathered from typically multiple meetings with the business.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that question. Moving on to the next question, Lynn asks, what kind of job tenure are you seeing from your participants?
This project specifically is fairly young in the process, and so we are seeing some good numbers with retention. However, we have data from previous work related to customized employment that has shown that when the jobs are truly customized and you are really meeting the needs of both the job seeker and the business, and I think that's really important, we have to meet the needs of both, that retention is far better than when you are looking at basically placing somebody into an open position merely because it's an open position and they're looking for a job. So we feel that the match and making that match as best we can in the beginning really leads to great success in the end, and individuals stay employed far longer. I don't have any data in front of me. Sorry, I could get that for you if I need to. So.
That's a great answer. I think that really folks have to look at it on a case-by-case basis and make sure that folks are getting into a position where they want to stay. And when you're able to customize a job like that, you know, the counselors see a need and they help fulfill that need for an employer with the client's talent. So that makes a lot of sense that you know, sometimes with any kind of job, it can seem like there's make work, but if it's a job that's specifically tailored to that person's interests, then it makes sense that folks would stay in their employment longer. Our next question is from Megan. How do you deal with helicopter parents who take over the meetings or intakes, and are you unable to even really get to talk to your consumer? So that's kind of been an up and coming issue here at the University of Wisconsin Stout with SBRI, with university students. It seems to be an issue with them too. So do you have any advice for folks who are?
I think building rapport with parents, I think parents are, I'm a parent, I know that I'm anxious about my son's looming graduation and what's going to happen to them, and you know, add on disability or disabilities plural, that just really ratchets up parents' concerns, and rightly so. And so if we can think about parents and where they're coming from and understand that and try to address, really find out what their worries are and help answer those questions, I think it's helpful. Allowing them to talk. Sometimes parents just need to vent and talk their frustrations through. And I have a parent that we've been working with who she's just frustrated. And sometimes you just have to let her talk for a few minutes. You know, you're going to need a little bit more time when you make that phone call. And once she gets through her frustrations and it can be anything from her own job to her worries about her daughter, once she gets through that, then she's ready to actually have a conversation and listen to what you say. But if you don't let her have that time, then you're going to meet a lot of resistance and potentially some anger. So, and I've been able to say, you know, I get it. I have kids. I understand where you're coming from. So adding that in has helped with me. Not everybody has kids, so that that can be difficult. So.
But it's been my experience in a lot of different situations that sometimes people just need to know that someone's listening to them and, you know, acknowledging what their concerns are. So I think that's a great piece of advice. Let's see here. Nancy asks, in your experience, how do employers react to the visual resumes?
We've had great success with those. We've also had great success with what we call a working interview, where instead of the individual doing a traditional sit down across the desk from the hiring manager and trying to answer questions that they might not be able to answer as well as someone else, where we actually say, can they come in and try out the job? Let us show you their skills. And we might start off with that visual resume and say, look, here's some of the tasks that John's really good at. We put together this resume for you. Let me just show it and pull it up on my laptop or my phone or iPad, whatever the case may be, and show it to the employer, or, you know, and then following that up with the working interview and letting them see the individual do the task for 30, 45 minutes. And that helps them, the business, to sometimes ease their concerns of what does this really look like, this whole customized employment job coach situation.
Well, that certainly makes sense, being able to see for yourself whether the person fits in with those job duties. I've got a question from Carrington. Do the job seekers determine themselves how many hours they can work, or is there some input from the employer and or employment specialist?
Well, we definitely start with
the job seeker and say, how many hours are you looking to work? Do you want to work part-time, full-time, certain days of the week? And that's what guides us. Once we begin working with businesses, then we have to look at what their needs are. And so if John wants to work Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and maybe every other Saturday, but the business needs them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and every other Saturday, then that's when the employment specialist puts on their negotiation skills with the job seeker and says, yeah, I get it, that you want these particular days off, but this is when the business really needs you, or whatever the case may be. But also knowing what their non-negotiables are going into the process is important. So if Wednesday nights are out, because that is when they always go to youth group at their church, or Sundays are always out, then we are absolutely respectful of those non-negotiables. But a lot of times people will say, well, I only want to work these days, but when push comes to shove and they really like the position, they're like, oh, okay, well, that's fine.
Sure. That makes sense. We have a question from Shannon. The question is, what is the average time frame from beginning to end of the customized employment process?
That is part of what we're looking at our research as well. We don't have any data that just yet that shows how long that process is. It really is individualized to the job seeker, their skill set, their experiences, and so we don't have any of that information just yet.
Sure. Would you mind answering perhaps for one of the two examples, the folks that were featured, around how long it may have taken for one or both of those folks to get through the process?
I do not know. I know that the process was pretty quick for the young man who was working with the tractor situation and the Carhartt jeans and all that kind of stuff. I know it was quick. I don't remember how long. And quite honestly, when Caitlin was talking, that's when my internet went out and I panicked. And so I don't even know who she was talking about at this point. So I apologize.
Oh, that's quite all right. Sometimes technology just helps us hone our problem solving skills, doesn't it? We have a little bit more specific questions. Regina asks, is customized employment similar to IPS for Michigan, or from that model, but with clients who have intellectual disabilities? If I didn't get that right, Regina, please feel free to type in the Q&A to clarify. But the question is customized employment similar to IPS?
I will be honest, I have heard of IPS. I am not familiar enough with it to be able to answer that question. And really looking at what that model is, that is not a model that we have here at the center that we have practiced.
Okay. I was just looking to see if I could find any information on Michigan's website, and I'm not sure. I wouldn't be able to answer this question just from the information that I was able to find quickly on the website. So Regina, if it's okay with you, I'm going to go ahead and record your question, and we'll have Jennifer look into it to see if there are similarities.
Sure.
For one of our other questions, so for the folks who were presented in the examples, the attendee asks why regular VR services were insufficient. Why did those folks need customized employment? Did they have special challenges or barriers that they had that would make them better candidates for customized employment rather than just regular VR services?
The individuals that were featured were individuals who self-selected to become part of our research study. And so they were offered the opportunity to be part of the research, and they chose to be a part of the research. And so that was really more the case rather than where VR chose a service for them. now in Virginia, we have customized employment as a service option for individuals who are connected to our state VR. And so, you know, if the DARS counselor speaks with the family and they feel that, you know, based on their skills that they have and their abilities and their life experiences, that customized employment would be a better match, then they can refer them to us separately for customized employment.
Super. Thank you for asking that. Let's see. Johnny has a concern. I'm sure this is shared by lots of parents and other folks. At the phase where the participant is more independent, what mechanisms are in place to ensure the safety of participants, so that they're safe and they're not being taken advantage of? I don't know in the case of a study how that would work, or just in general how that would work.
I'm assuming that this is a question just in general, as you know, parents are concerned about, my child is get ready to go out into the community and be at a job site. I have worked in a program where we were based out of a hospital, and parents were often concerned with just dropping their children off at the hospital and, you know, us not finding them or losing them at some point along the way. And, you know, so it really is individualized to that client and their work setting. And so we typically, when we find someone a job, no matter what the situation is, we start with them at the first day, meeting them at the door, you know, or in the parking lot, wherever we've kind of set up as our place to meet, and walking them through the whole process of how to get into the building, how to navigate from the entrance to their workstation, and then, you know, at the end of the day, that whole process as well as throughout the day, making sure that they know how to navigate the site. If it's a large building, making sure that they have points of contact, and really building in natural supports along the way, and communicating. I am big on communication. Everybody that works for me hears me talk about it. If you don't tell families what's going on, then they're going to be nervous. And so we need to be as communicative as possible.
And I think with Johnny's concern, possibly, and I'm not sure, but it makes sense to me that since your counselors are making such, going to the extent to make such good relationships with the employers, that it's somebody that the counselor trusts would be able to handle and, you know, not misuse the opportunities they have to hire the folks who have disabilities. I think that probably there's a lot of trust involved on all ends.
And we do training for coworkers and the supervisors as well, coming into this, into the employment situation. In fact, we just had someone get hired on at a business, and it sets kind of back off of a road that's heavily kind of industrial in nature, and the new employee is taking U-Serve, which is like Lyft or whatever, to and from her job site. And we communicated with mom to say, have you driven back here? Do you see the setup? Because it's pretty dark when she gets off, and there's not really a whole lot of people still at the job site, and we just want to make sure you're comfortable with this. If y'all are all good, you know, the employee seems fine with it, but we just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. And as it turned out, the employer contacted my job coach yesterday afternoon and said, you know, we're not comfortable with this. And she hadn't even talked about it to him. And he said, you know, the
new employees having to stay here until 6. There's not really many of us around. We want to make sure she's safe, so they're ending her day at 5:30 just to make sure she's safe.
Sure. That's fantastic. I do see that a few folks have raised their hands in our chat. If you have questions that we can't answer in the Q&A, if you're on the phone and you're unable to type them in the question and answer box here in our Zoom platform, we're going to have folks go ahead and send those questions in via email. We will have some information about email, and you'll receive an email tomorrow after the webinar just giving you directions on how to get your continuing education credits. So if you have a question, we can't get to it today through phone, it would be great if you could email those to us and we'll forward them to Jennifer and make sure that you get an answer. I have a few other questions here in the Q&A box. Seth asks, are all of these individuals generally those receiving supported employment-related funds under a Medicaid waiver, or just some of them?
The individuals that were highlighted in this particular situation were not receiving supported employment through Medicaid waiver. They were receiving the customized employment through the research grant.
Okay.
We, in general, at the Research and Training Center here, when we have individuals who are referred, like I was talking about for customized employment, the vast majority of them, I would say, are coming through us through state VR. We do have a few folks that will maybe transition over to Medicaid waiver services, but for the most part, they're coming to us from VR versus Medicaid waiver.
Sure. The final question is pretty specific. Beth asks, I'm a VR transition counselor at NYS Commission for the Blind. In hearing your discussion, it almost sounds like CE in Virginia is a supported employment service and not a competitive employment service. Does this make sense? We currently have customized employment as an option under our competitive employment service.
It is a competitive employment service. Okay. So I don't know how it's worded up there, but we do not provide any type of employment service that is not competitive.
Okay. Well, that is all the questions that I have right now from our attendees. I think that it was really great for folks to have that, like I said before, that experience of hearing from the counselors themselves and getting a little bit more of the detail into those questions and finding out about the consumer's interests ahead of time. I think that that's probably really key for those counselors to make sure that someone is getting a customized experience and getting into a position that is going to work both for the employer and for the consumer. It's always interesting to me when you're working with employers, you definitely have to show them, quote, what's in it for me. So looking at their environment, at a workplace, and seeing a need that could be filled by someone, one of your consumers who has an interest in that sort of thing. It just seems like a really great fit to make sure that you're finding that need. Nobody likes make work, so it sounds like it's a very good system for making sure that that employers are getting what they need and that your consumers are getting what they need too. How long has the study been going on, Jennifer?
We're about 2.5 years in. Of course, part of that first year is getting approvals and things like that. So we're about 2 years of actually working with individuals.
Okay. Now, what was your? How did you go about recruiting folks for the project?
For the actual job seekers, we network with our state vocational rehab counselors, all of the local school systems, as well as parent groups, like our
autism associations, Down syndrome associations, things like that.
Okay, and you just advertise statewide through these different organizations and through your networks?
It's only here in the Richmond metro area.
Okay.
We did have the group up north that we were working with, but that has since ended, and so now we're just here, Richmond metro area, so it's not even statewide.
Okay, how many, if you don't mind my asking, how many participants were you able to recruit?
Right now we are at 27, excuse me, I have to double my numbers, close to 60.
Okay.
And half of those individuals are randomized into a control group, and the other half are randomized into the customized employment group.
Okay, and how long is the study projected to last?
It's a 5-year study, so we have about 2-ish more years.
Okay. It's always interesting with those studies. The ish is sometimes the part that gets you over the hump and helps you get all the reporting done that you need to do once you've come to your conclusions. So that's interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Terry, I thought I saw your microphone going on. Was there something that you wanted to chip in or pitch in about?
Just getting ready for the transition. When
okay.
Are we feeling done with Q&A?
Well, I'm gonna just throw out the ask one more time. If anybody has any questions, now's the time. Otherwise, we'll turn it over to Terry and Jen in a few moments. But Jen, is there anything else that you'd like to add about the study that you found helpful or that our audience members might like to know about?
I think just staying abreast of our website. We have webcasts, we have web courses, fact sheets, all of that information on our website. So I would encourage folks to go there.
And can I type that website into the chat box, Jennifer?
I can do that.
Oh, okay. Either way is fine with me. Well, I think that we're going to go ahead and thank Jennifer for all of her time and for answering all our questions and bringing us such a rich webinar experience with all the folks, the counselors who were able to share their personal experiences with us. If anybody does have any questions, you can go ahead and send them to us. You'll be receiving an email tomorrow with instructions for getting your CRCs, but you can also use that email to ask any questions that you may think of later. But with that, Terry, I think I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Heidi, and a quick handoff to Jennifer Gundlach-Klott that will say a little bit more about the CRCs that Heidi was talking about, as well as where you can find both this recording, when this would be available, as well as other recordings of all of our previous webinars. So Jen, take it to you, and when Jen is done, we'll pretty much be done, unless somebody has a question that leaps to mind in the next few minutes.
Thanks, Terry. We hope you all enjoyed today's webcast. If you are in need of the CRC for today's webcast, the link I just added to the chat box contains steps to request the CRC. This can also be found on our webcast page within our website at projecte3.com. You will also receive an email tomorrow with these instructions. All of our webcasts are archived and eligible for one CRC. These can also be found on our webcast page. If you have any questions about CRCs, please direct those to projecte3tc@gmail.com. And a reminder that next week's webcast will be on Thursday, February 6th at 11 a.m. Central, and is titled Instructional Strategies for Acquisition and Maintenance of Customized Job Tasks. And this is presented by Tim Reason. Thanks for joining today.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. And let's see, I think that's it. Thanks, everybody. Again, if you have any questions, we keep saying that, but follow up, something may occur to you, you can send us a note from all the emails you receive from us. And the piece, today's webinar, as I said earlier, just in case you have friends that are interested, you say it was a really good webinar. They also have a free CRC credit. It takes us anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks to get the recordings posted. As I noted, we want to ensure that all of our captioning lines up with all of our presentation materials and that type of thing, and just workload. So don't expect to see it posted tomorrow. It will be a while. But for those of you that watched and get the email, answer the evaluation, give us your name and email at the end of the evaluation form if you'd like a CRC credit. And that as well can take a week to 2 weeks to get, just given the volume that we have on folks requesting CRC credits. So with that, we will end the meeting, and thanks everybody for joining us today. And as Jen noted, we'll be same place, same time, same station next week for another tremendous webinar in our series. Thanks very much, everybody, and have a wonderful day wherever you are.